Hi, this is Alexandra, AJ Diakon for CSE 012, and I will be doing my presentation using the dataset CARS. In this project, there's car trends that have been abstracted and concentrated to, I'm assuming, the entire globe. That's one of the limitations that I'll mention later. There was 4 different dictionaries within the main dictionary, including the dimensions, the engine information, fuel information, and the method of identification for the cars. It was pretty straight and narrow, not a lot of trends already within the data, and pretty much just described the cars as sort of you would if you were booking one. And then the 3 abstractions that I decided to use, I looked at if there was a trend between the type of fuel a vehicle requires and then the average horsepower the vehicle exhibits. I looked at the relationship between city miles per gallon and highway miles per gallon for Nissan vehicles, and then considering different drive lines, meaning 4-wheel or all-wheel, front and rear, if there are certain drive lines where bigger or smaller heights are usually anticipated, and then what sort of drive line do the largest vehicles have usually. So as I mentioned, we have the main sort of dictionary that has 4 dictionaries within it: dimensions, engine information, fuel information, and identification. And then you can see here the 4 different ones that branch off of it. And then the only dictionary that had a dictionary within it was engine information, which was the engine statistics, which includes the horsepower and the torque. You can kind of see here, which I'm about to mention with my limitations, that there aren't that many integers, and there's actually a lot of strings, which proved to be kind of difficult because it's hard to make lists out of strings. Or even here I wanted to work with the hybrid, but it's a Boolean, and so I tried seeing if I could count the zeros or the ones, or if it was a yes or a no, and I couldn't seem to come up with anything, so maybe it was empty. But there were definitely some limitations with this data. So yeah, there was an abundance of string variables, which did make it kind of difficult to observe certain relationships between attributes that I wanted to. There was no definition of the location of vehicles, which I thought might have been interesting looking at different countries, because I know other countries actually have a lot better carbon footprints than the USA does. There was also the timestamps weren't that great either. For educational purposes, they gather this information, maybe I think it's like 2009, 2011, 2012, 2014, but either way there wasn't a lot of vehicles that were logged in between those years. So if you were looking to look at trends over time, it was kind of difficult because there would just be a bunch of cars in 4 different years, and that was sort of it. Some of the dictionaries contain different amounts of rows. For example, I'm going to go back. The height, length, and width, not every car was booked or they put that information in, so then that was sometimes difficult to look at relationships between that and other dictionaries or lists, because there was different amounts of rows, which the Python didn't seem to like. And I also discovered a few really extreme outliers when I was just sort of playing around with the data, but I don't think that skewered my data that much. So looking at my first abstraction, is there a trend between the type of fuel a vehicle requires and the amount of horsepower the average vehicle exhibits? And there definitely was E85, which I did have to look up, which is a little cheaper than gasoline, but apparently it's a lot worse for the environment, but it on average is used with cars that have the most horsepower, which I think is interesting, sort of as we are taking care of the environment more. Fast cars apparently use a lot less efficient gas, versus if you look at the electric cars, really have less horsepower and probably go slower, so they aren't as flashy. Maybe people don't want them anymore or want them as much, which is unfortunate because that's, I think, really important moving forward, is leaving less of a footprint on our environment. The next relationship I looked at was between city miles per gallon and highway miles per gallon for Nissan vehicles. And you can see that the highway miles per gallon is way higher, which means it's way more efficient. And I think as a country, people own way more cars than they need to, even if they live in a city, even if they live right outside of a city. And yes, public transportation is really difficult in some areas, and I think that that is something that the government should be becoming aware of, and that increasing public transportation and making it a better experience for their citizens should be important, given that having a car near or in a city releases so much or uses up so much more gas. And then my final abstraction was looking at the different drive lines. Are some usually, are there trends with the height of the vehicle? And it didn't seem like there was a huge difference. Rear, rear, rear wheel drive was sort of the smallest cars, and front wheel drive was the largest. So I don't know exactly if that has huge social impacts, but I think as an individual, if you are looking to have front wheel drive or all wheel drive, you should be anticipating probably buying a more expensive car, because bigger cars are more expensive. So I sort of summarize this here. My first abstraction just being that it should be something that we're aware of, that faster, fancier cars are less great for the environment, and that whether electric cars are way more expensive or the fast ones are really expensive, it's not as flashy as the ones that require a lot of horsepower, a lot of faster. And I think that we should just start moving towards and making the environment more of a priority. Sort of same with my second abstraction, that just having a car in the city or around a city where you're stopping and going is so bad for the environment because you use up so much gas. So public transportation, I think as gas really becomes a crisis and we have less of it, should be such a priority for the government. And then my last one just being, if you're looking to buy a car with front wheel drive or all wheel drive, you should be anticipating spending a little more money. So these were my 3 abstractions, and I will finish with saying I neither gave or received unauthorized assistance on this assignment, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you.